I've never been one for drama, but this actually happened to me, and telling it straight is the only way I can breathe through it. What you're about to hear isn't fiction. It's a long scar I've learned to trace with steady fingers. At the Greenpoint Terminal Market in Brooklyn, beneath a tide of Edison bulbs and fluttering vendor banners, I watched my ex-boyfriend Lucas swipe his square reader and sell my painting. The one that vanished from my studio, like it was his. He had my work propped behind him in a cheap white frame, the edges of my signature tucked under beveled matboard like a mouth forced shut. People stood around with iced coffees from devotion, snapping pictures, murmuring about the color story. And Lucas grinned over the Venmo chimes as if he'd composed the sky himself. I could smell the river, hear the F train grinding somewhere beyond the warehouses, and I realized the sickest part wasn't the theft. It was that he'd learned my pitch phrases word for word and was feeding them back to strangers for cash. I reached for the corner of the table where he'd laid a stack of bogus certificates, and he slapped his palm over mine so lightly you'd think it was affection. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. We broke up in April after a winter that kept resetting itself like a glitching elevator. 3 floors of "we're fine," and then the plunge. When I met Lucas 2 years earlier at a group show on Roebling Street, he'd been the kind of charming that comes with a kitchen timer. You could feel it ticking, but it made you lean in. He called himself a creative strategist, and laughed like it was an apology. I was barely afloat. A shoebox studio off Troutman in Bushwick, coffee and gesso in equal measure, a part-time at Blick on Myrtle to keep canvas in reach. He had a way of making scarcity feel like a brand. You don't need to sell more, he said. You need to sell smarter. He registered my domain name before I'd decided on a new series, murrowwnart.com. He set up a basic Shopify store and said he'd optimize. We split the costs for an Epson SureColor P900 because he claimed I was leaving archival money on the table. He even designed a certificate of authenticity template, black minimalist frame, tiny QR that linked to a Google Sheet inventory he managed. "Trust me," he'd say, tucking hair behind my ear while we stood at the window that overlooked a brick wall. "You make, I move." The first missing piece was small, a 10 by 10 oil study of the Manhattan Bridge I did on a brutal blue day. I blamed myself. My studio is crowded, my brain more so. Then a diptych vanished. Sunny side after rain. 2 panels that had watched me cry and then stop crying. I had notes in a Moleskine about varnished dates. I had bad photos on my phone. When I asked Lucas, he shrugged. "Maybe you sold it on Etsy and forgot?" He said it like it was a joke, like I was adorable for losing track. And then he kissed my temple and left for a brand sprint with a new client. A week later, 2 PayPal notifications popped. Chargebacks on prints of those same pieces, claimed as not received, though I hadn't shipped anything. I wrote to customer support with trembling fingers, sending them screenshots of my bare order page. My inbox answered with canned pity. I could have forgiven one coincidence, maybe 2. But the night I saw my own brushwork on an Instagram ad, cropped and filtered till the highlights looked like sequins, I paused my doom scroll so hard my thumb hurt. The handle was at Blue Hair Creative. The captions were copy I recognized. Atlantic light with a salt-bloomed edge. The hashtags were mine, line breaks mine, price points mine minus a grotesque limited time drop discount. The storefront linked to a Shopify site with my paintings renamed like found puppies. Bridge number 04. Rain study, A. The artist bio was a paragraph Lucas had written for me. He'd even preserved the typo where painter became paintner, like a bruise I could suddenly point to. I clicked on the About page and found his name nowhere, just a footer with an LLC. Blue Hair, Bedford Avenue, a P.O. box number. I was under debt and underfed, but not unobservant. While he slept on my sofa again, post-breakup visits justified as helping tie up the business side. I crept past the squeaky board and sat at my desk. I opened the Google Sheet inventory he loved to brag about. I watched the cursor twitch as if someone else were looking at it too. A tab I'd never seen, Alt SKUs. held a list of my pieces mapped to new item IDs. Another tab, COAs, contained 32 serial numbers I had never printed, each tied to a PDF certificate with my forged signature in vector. I zoomed in and saw my loop wrong, too perfect, the flaw that made it mine ironed out into nothing. The trick was simple. He'd exported a scan of my scribble, converted it into outlines, and now he could drag my name like a sticker. Later, in the morning haze, he asked if I'd seen the National playing a secret set at Baby's All Right that weekend. I said I couldn't afford tickets. "You will," he said, and poured my coffee into the mug his sister gave us, a cheap ceramic with the word hustle in gold. I didn't go to the police first because I knew better. New York will take a theft report for a stolen bike faster than for stolen art, unless there's something obvious like a smashed lock and a crying child. I DM'd 3 buyers under fake names, asking for close-ups of the signatures and corners. 2 wrote back, sending photos of my falsified COAs in frames that bore the same peel of discount tape. One told me he'd bought it at the Greenpoint Terminal Market from the artist's manager, a guy with the careful beard I used to like running my thumb along. He said the manager spoke about me in soft terms, like I was shy, like I didn't do well with crowds. He said you preferred your studio, the buyer wrote, and that he handled the, human side. I thanked him and stared at that phrase until the letters melted. The human side. Lucas knew everybody because he never stopped introducing himself. He was at the Ace Hotel lobby, laughing with someone who published zines. He was at Roberta's in Bushwick, sliding into a booth like he belonged in their brand deck. He knew a guy at Artsy, a girl at Arnett, and a cousin who could print gallery-quality frames in Long Island City for a steal. He could make you feel like proximity to him was a promise. I'd watched gallerists remove their headphones when he approached. I'd watched him stretch little favors into rope. The Greenpoint confrontation wasn't planned. It was the first warm Saturday in May, and I'd walked there because the river helps me think. I wasn't wearing war boots. I had paint on my cuffs and a tote bag that said "Girls Draw Everything." I kept my breath steady until the buyer in front of me said, admiring, "You really captured the rain without making it depressing." Lucas didn't flinch when he saw me. He smiled the way you smile when you've spotted your target demo in the wild. He put a finger to his lips like we were in on a bit. He reached under the table and palmed the topmost COA from the stack. "I'm not here for a scene," I said quietly. "I'm here for my work." "You're here," he said, "because you need me to move it." He spoke so gently that the couple to my left kept browsing. He had already recalibrated the reality. I was hysterical. He was patient. He promised the buyer an artist meet and greet at my studio, then collected payment with a smile big enough to refund the world. "Leave," I told him. "Pack it up and get out, or I call the organizer and explain you're selling stolen art." "Stolen?" He laughed like the word was a party favor. "We have a partnership, Mara. You sign the COAs." I pressed my thumb into the mat board until I felt the grain give. "No, Lucas. You did." I held my phone up and snapped a photo of the certificate. "And now so did I." He leaned in, breath like wintergreen. "You'll destroy your brand," he whispered. "If you go scorched earth on this. You'll look ungrateful, unstable. Let me make this right." He patted the table like a patient dog waited under it. "Dinner tonight, Lilia? I'll get the Cassio e Pepe and we'll talk margins." I took the COA anyway. I slid it into my tote like a blade and walked away, but I was already planning more than a dinner refusal. The first ally I called was Danny, my oldest friend, who knows the difference between my panic and my resolve by the way I say hey. She came over with 2 iced lattes and a composition notebook labeled Operation Take Back. We flipped my inventory, circled what was missing, highlighted overlaps with at Blue Hair Creative, and began building a timeline. Danny had done a stint at a startup and understood legalese the way I understand light. "We need several lanes," she said, tapping her pen. "This doesn't get solved with one righteous monologue. Lane 1. DMCA notices to Shopify and Instagram. Lane 2. Volunteer lawyers for the arts, VLA, to get actual counsel. Lane 3. Contact the Greenpoint organizer and any event he might hit next, renegade craft, artists and fleas, so he's banned preemptively. Lane 4, receipts. It's not enough that it's yours, she said. We have to make it obviously, publicly, incontestably yours. I had receipts, but they were raw. I had process videos on my phone. The underpaint wash that always starts too purple, my hand shaking after a call with my mother, a stray cat walking across a drying panel. I had paintings with fingerprints on the frame from the day the radiator coughed steam. But Lucas had something smoother. Proof designed for the outsider's glance. If I accused, he'd counter. If I cried, he'd smile. The math wasn't with me yet. We filed the DMCA notices first. Shopify's form asked me to confirm ownership and swear under penalty of perjury that the work was mine. I hovered over the submit button like it was a cliff. Danny put her finger over mine and pressed. Instagram's form was worse, a labyrinth of drop-downs. I filled each with a little fury and a lot of care. We attached side-by-sides. My studio photos versus his ads, my original file names, sunnyside_diptych_v2.tiff, versus his bridge 04. We attached the Greenpoint COA photo and circled the QR code with a neon arrow. Danny drafted a cease and desist letter in Google Docs, plain and firm. She mailed a hard copy to Blue Hair's P.O. box, and to the registered agent address we found through New York's business directory. He thinks we won't do the boring work, she said, sealing the envelope with a vengeance. He's wrong. VLA assigned me a clinic appointment within a week. The lawyer, a kind woman named Phoebe who loved ugly ceramic mugs, looked at my folder like it was a patient she could save. She explained that while art theft is a mess, the forgery of a signature and the sale of works with falsified COAs turn the mess into actionable sludge. Document everything, she said. Record your next conversation with him if it's legal where you are. And in New York, it is one-party consent. She wrote down phrases to use in writing. Misappropriation, false designation of origin, unfair competition, and a detail that made my breath catch because I'd registered copyright for several of the works early, a habit I'd cultivated in a fit of optimism. Statutory damages were on the table. She warned me it wouldn't be fast. She warned me it might be a settlement, not fireworks. Whether or not we go to court, she said, you need the court of public opinion aligned with the facts. Tell the story, but do it like a professional. Professional, I said, tasting the word like a lemon. In another life, Lucas would have told me to smile when I said it. The villain's power doesn't always look like a throne. Sometimes it looks like a Wi-Fi password and a login you don't control. Lucas had registered my domain under his email. He'd built my mailing list on his MailChimp account. He had the backup codes. The day after we sent the cease and desist, he locked me out of my own site for maintenance. A week later, he sent me a text that read, "We should talk numbers." The gall flickered like neon. He mentioned inventory discrepancies. He mentioned brand voice alignment. He mentioned taking MararoWNart.com to the next LTV. The subtext was clear. This wasn't theft, this was management. If I'd been less tired, I would have laughed. Danny filmed me in the studio the night before everything broke. Tell them who you are, she said, her phone on a tripod, microphone clipped to my thrifted shirt. I introduced myself. I told the camera about my process, about the corner of my canvas where I always hide a tiny pencil mark, my private proof of life. I showed the UV pen I used to sign under paint. Under blacklight, a thin ghost of my name rose. If you bought a piece from Blue Hair Creative, I said, steady as a metronome, I will verify whether it's mine in person. No judgment, no shame. You were lied to, I'll make it right. I posted the video on Instagram and TikTok at 10 a.m. on a Friday, not expecting much. I made coffee and prepared to spend the day answering 10 or 12 DMs and then crying into a towel. By noon, the view count was at 80,000. By 2 p.m., it was 300,000. Artists started stitching the video, telling their own near-miss stories of managers who became siphons. A journalist from Hyperallergic DM'd me, then a freelancer who sometimes wrote for The Cut. People who'd bought from Blue Hair sent photos of their COAs. The QR code on the Greenpoint certificate linked to a Google Drive Lucas had forgotten to lock. Danny and I mirrored the drive in case he shut it. It held exports of my high-res scans, a written brand script, that included my habit of crying at the end of a painting, a price guide where my work was undercut by 30% to accelerate adoption. He'd detailed his plan like a school project. He'd even written copy for a blog post unveiling my new bridge series that he had stitched from my notes and his fantasy. It was almost funny, like stealing someone's houseplants and writing a caption about tending them since childhood. At 5 p.m., Shopify responded to our DMCA with the words that felt like an oxygen hit. The Blue Hair store had been disabled pending review. Instagram removed 3 ads. People in my DMs cheered. A few trolls told me to be grateful anyone wants your art at all, to which I said nothing. Lucas texted me at 7:13 p.m. Cute. I typed and erased a dozen replies before sending a screenshot of the VLA letterhead and a single line. Don't contact me again unless it's through counsel. He called anyway. I let it go to voicemail. He tried again and again until the sound of my phone buzzing felt like a fire alarm, and then he left a message so calm it made my skin go cold. Mara, he said, this is spiraling. You're making yourself look unhinged. People don't like messy artists. Pull the posts. Let me fix this. He paused long like a man taking a breath before a dive. You wouldn't be here without me. I played the message for Danny. Perfect, she said, and she meant it. That's the line. We planned the drop, because revenge tastes best with revenue. Saturday morning, I'd host an open studio verification day and a limited release called Take Back the Work. Anyone who brought in a Blue Hair COA got a free small print, no questions asked. Anyone who'd bought a stolen piece could get an on-the-spot UV verification under blacklight, and if it was mine, I'd swap them an authenticated edition plus a signed note explaining the mess. Danny set up a fresh Shopify on a domain I owned, mararowan.com. She built a simple, clean landing page. My face, my hand signing under blacklight, the words, I make the work. She moved my mailing list to a new provider by begging friends to forward the sign-up link. She made 2 buttons, verify and buy. At 9 p.m., the hyperallergic piece went live, the headline blunt and kind. Brooklyn painter says ex-manager forged certificates and sold her work without permission. By 9:30, the Greenpoint organizer emailed me to say Lucas was banned, effective immediately. At 10 p.m., my TikTok crossed 1 million views, and my phone started to feel hot enough to fry oil paint. I slept 5 hours. I woke to a world that had tilted. Strangers were on my side, which sounds like a soft thing until you feel the weight of it. It's not that the mob is kind. It's that a crowd can press a bully backward by an inch that becomes a mile. I walked to my studio with a blacklight and a borrowed folding table. Danny brought a box of prints and a crate of bagels. People were already waiting, standing in a ragged line down the hall, holding frames against their chests like shields. The first person was the buyer from Greenpoint. He looked sheepish. I took his frame, unclipped the back, pulled the mapboard and clicked the blacklight. My name bloomed faint and certain along the bottom under paint, the way I'd taught myself to mark it when I was terrified of losing myself. It's yours, he said, eyes wet. It's always been mine, I answered softly, but now it's ours. He laughed, hugged me, and left with a signed print and a story. They kept coming. A nurse from Elmhurst with a fake COA number that matched a spreadsheet entry. A barista from Fort Greene who'd saved 3 months to buy a birthday gift for her girlfriend. Each time, the blacklight told the truth. Each time, the COA looked official until you touched it and felt the cheap paper flex. Danny checked off numbers, took photos for documentation, and put stickers on the frames, verified. We handed out bagels until the crate was empty, then sent someone for more. Midway through the day, my phone buzzed with a Shopify notification that made me dizzy. A sale. Then another. Then a cascade pattern, a timpani. Within 2 hours, the Take Back the Work print run was half gone. The analytics screen was just lines climbing. What's happening? I asked the room, and a girl with lavender hair who'd been live streaming said, delighted. You're trending." Lucas, of course, pushed back. He posted a Notes app statement that read like a text from a man who says context matters when you tell him he hurt you. He claimed he'd invested in my career, that he'd advanced costs, true, and that the COA controversy was a misunderstanding around automation. Automation, as if he had replaced me with a script and I was overreacting to a time-saving measure. He threatened legal action for defamation. He sent clumsy emails to VLA's pro bono counsel that made Phoebe hum with amusement. "If he wants to sue," she said, "let him. We'll bring the drive." The worst hour came when my mother called from Florida and asked why my name was on the internet, with a scandal, the word bending like taffy in her mouth. I told her what was happening and she went quiet, the kind of quiet where I could hear her counting the ways she couldn't fix it. Then she cleared her throat. "You know when you were 6 and that neighbor girl took your chalk drawing from the sidewalk and told everyone she drew it?" she said. "You cried and then you went inside and drew the same thing bigger on the driveway. The dads came out and argued. You ignored them and colored the whole sky." I laughed and cried at the same time. "Draw the sky again," she said. "Bigger." We won't pretend it was a single knockout. It was a war of attrition fought in emails and DMs, and the court of soft benches and bad lighting. VLA filed a letter detailing claims, attaching the drive index, the forged COAs, the public posts, and the voicemail where he said I wouldn't be here without him. Phoebe mentioned statutory damages and attorney's fees in a tone that's almost tender. She CC'd Lucas and his registered agent. 3 days later, his counsel wrote back, the first grown-up in his corner, and asked if we'd consider a meeting. Danny and I went in person because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that pixels can hide a trembling hand but a table can't. The conference room was at a WeWork in Williamsburg that smelled like new carpet. Lucas arrived 5 minutes late and didn't look at me. His lawyer did the talking. She talked about equity in the brand, about value Lucas added, about the pain of public narrative. Phoebe responded with phrases that translated to, "Sit down." She opened a folder with printed screenshots of the drive and the QR-linked COAs and said the word fraud like she was laying down a tile. Lucas shifted in his seat. When he finally spoke, his charm had dried around the edges. He told me I was enjoying the attention. He said my sales bump wouldn't last without him. He said I had weaponized vulnerability. He said a lot of things I've trained myself not to store. I looked at him the way you look at a painting you finished and then reworked and then ruined and finally painted over, recognition and distance, a bomb. "You don't get to call my survival a brand," I said quietly. "You stole something that doesn't belong to you. That's not management, that's theft." I slid the Greenpoint COA across the table until it bumped his knuckles. "You forged me," I said. "Now I'm real again." We left with a signed settlement in principle. The details took another month, a payment plan like a drip, a stipulation that he'd never represent or sell my work again, a transfer of my domain passwords under the eyes of someone who cared about consequences. The money wouldn't make me whole, but the paper mattered. For the first time since this began, I slept without dreaming about opening drawers and finding them empty. The night everything turned into a number, I was eating leftover cold pizza on the studio floor while my prints cured. Danny was scrolling through orders like she was watching fireworks. "Look," she said, shoving the screen at me. My daily sales graph on Shopify looked impossible. Before the video and the drop, I made around $1,200 in a good day. That day, it was $3,700 by noon. By midnight, it was over $6,000. The next day, higher. Phone buzz, buzz, buzz like a heart monitor. If you want a Hallmark narrator, go find one. I'll tell you the truth. I needed the money. Rent, storage, the P900 that ran out of ink every time the light changed. Money is how you keep making work. People who found me through the mess stayed for the art. People who saw the blacklight believed. I propped my feet on the crate of frames and cried snotty tears that made Danny turn up the music. A week later, I went back to Greenpoint Terminal Market, not to look for Lucas, who'd been scrubbed from their vendor list, but to stand where that first square swipe happened and see if the air tasted different. It did, like river metal and charcoal pretzel smoke. Two women stopped me near a booth selling vintage denim and asked if I was the painter from TikTok. One said she'd never bought art before because she was afraid of getting it wrong. I told her there's no wrong when you buy the thing that won't leave your head. She nodded like she'd been waiting for permission to trust herself. Lucas didn't vanish. Men like him don't. He pivoted, as they say. Started some brand for story-driven wellness that sells candles with names like Calendar Cleanse. I don't Google him the way I used to check scabs. Sometimes his face flashes by in someone else's tagged photo at a bar in the Lower East Side, and I swipe past with no spike of adrenaline, just that small astonished calm you feel when you recognize an old street and realize it no longer matters where it went. The settlement checks arrive on time because his lawyer likes to sleep. The coldest revenge isn't the headline. It's the piece that settles in like primer. I'm telling you this the way the river tells the shore, not to erode it, but to draw a truer line. If you ever find yourself staring at a piece of your life hung up in someone else's booth, remember that your name has layers only you can show. Sign your underpaint in UV. Photograph your corners. Register your work when you can. Keep friends who know how to file a DMCA and bring bagels and call it a plan. And when someone says you wouldn't be here without me, consider the broken little truth inside it. Maybe you wouldn't be here, exactly here, but maybe you'd be somewhere softer. Then choose the place you want to be. In my studio at dusk, with the windows open to Myrtle Avenue noise and a train scraping the sky, I paint a new bridge. It's not a revenge symbol. It's just a thing that holds, a thing that ticks like a timer and then doesn't drop. Under the first wash, I write my name in invisible ink. I switch off the light and click the black light on and watch it shine a hush blue, a small private moon. For a second, I think about Lucas holding up a fake certificate under market bulbs, and I feel nothing at all. Not anger, not triumph, just a steady, quiet surprise that my hand never forgot itself. The city hums. The paint smells like tomorrow. Somewhere, a receipt dings on my phone and I don't check it. And when I finally sign in the corner where the varnish will dry slow and honest, I know exactly what it costs to be real, and I pay it in full. The end.